My name's Tom Sackville. I'm chairman of the Family Survival Trust, which is a charity that tries to look after families who've lost children into cults, into abusive cults. And Audrey, who I'm here with today, has spent her life counselling people who've been affected by cults. I haven't been affected personally, but when I was a Member of Parliament up in Bolton in Lancashire, people came to see me who'd got this problem, and I suddenly realised that where there's lots of help for people who've got into drugs or whatever, ex-criminals, whatever, there's really no help for people who've got involved with cults. And their families who had felt that bereaved almost, that they'd lost them. So then, as it happens, I became for a short time a Home Office Minister and found that in this country the establishment is pretty much decided not to do anything about this, whether you're talking about police, social services, education, the Home Office, the Foreign Office. All the people who might be involved in doing something about cults are really not doing it, which is why I joined what was then FAIR, which has now become the Family Survival Trust, and we try and keep the flag flying for those families who have suffered and are still suffering as a result of cults. And there are plenty of cults around still. It's just their PR and their access to legal resources is much better, so you hear many less stories about them, but they're around and still doing a lot of damage to young people.
My name is Audrey Chater, and my two daughters in 1997 were recruited into the Church of Scientology. It was a while before I found out where they were, and I decided to go after them and get them back, which was a horrendous experience because I went into a place where I didn't have a friend at all, and everyone was against me. But I did succeed in bringing my youngest daughter out at that time. The elder one stayed in for 8 years, and she married a Scientologist and had 2 children. And I stayed with her all the way. I would visit her any time just to let her know that I was around, and I used to discuss things with her, whether she wanted to or not. And eventually I said, I think we've said everything we have to say, but I'm still here, and if you ever want to leave, you let me know. And I went away, and at that time I was living in Norway with my husband, and she rang me one day, and in a very small voice, which didn't sound like her at all because she doesn't have a small voice, she said, I'm ready to listen now. So what had happened, I don't know. But I went straight away from Norway into Denmark, and I brought her out with the 2 little girls, who at that time were 3 and 1.5. And she went away to live on the island of Bornholm because she wanted to stay in Denmark for the children, who were both Danish. And she started a business of her own, and she has survived. She bought a house, she's done everything. And I'm very proud of her. The girls are marvellous, and I'm one of the few successful parents who have recovered children from cults. There are very few of us. Because brainwashing is such a powerful thing. And it's a scary thing. It brings fear with it. Somehow, once a person is controlled by someone else in this situation, it takes almost a miracle to get them out. So lots of young people are lost forever, and it's a world problem.
As first joined the Church of Scientology, how did they change as people? What did you notice?
I must correct you. You mustn't use the term joined.
Oh,
Nobody joins a cult. They are recruited by another person.
Okay.
So
Recruited.
they are recruited
My apologies.
by somebody deliberately looking for converts. My daughter was in Denmark and it was raining and she ran into a shop to get out of the rain, and it happened to be a Scientology bookshop. And she started to read the stuff. And then somebody came over and said, "Are you interested in this?" And she said, "Well, yes, yes." And that was it. That was how it happened to her. Because you see, their literature is very convincing. And they quote people who become Scientologists, film stars, and young people are looking for this. They're looking for famous people who've been converted, and they think, well, if they must be all right.
Yeah. So what did you notice about their behaviour when they?
Oh, well, of course they're all right until you start to question them and disagree with them, and then they become very abusive. We had a bad time after that. For the first time ever, I had a bad time with my children because they had been warned that I wouldn't like it, and so they were expecting trouble and they got it.
An interesting point to pick up that cults, Scientology, Moonies, they are trained in how to alienate new converts from their parents and friends, because they know these people around them are going to object and going to want them back. So they get them ready and have them calling their parents Satan and all sorts of terrible stuff, which you can imagine for any parent is about as painful as you can get beyond actually losing a child. And it is very organised and it's very nasty, and people don't quite realise how these cults actually conspire to get control of people and to get rid of their past life. And I think if more people around understood quite how bad it is, there would probably be more action taken to control cults. You may say, how do you control brainwashing? How do you criminalise it? Well, according to our authorities, there is no definition of mental kidnapping. In France, interesting enough, where they take this very seriously, they passed a law called the Abu Bakr law about 10 years ago, which actually made it a criminal offence to exploit a person in a state of psychological subjection. And they've brought all sorts of cases against Scientology and other cults using that law. So it can be done. It's just it needs the will. It needs for more people to understand just how nasty these organisations are.
When you're learning, everything is a learning experience. When you're your age, everything. So they go for that. You see, but we can offer you this. We can offer you that. Just listen, read our literature, listen to us, and it's very hard to resist. Not for me, but for a young person, especially if they're away from home.
You went to rescue them. Did you do it single-handedly?
Yes.
How did you go about it?
I just walked in. I rang the bell and walked in.
So were they hostile to you then?
They weren't very pleased. But at the same time, they wanted to convince me that they were all right and that this was really a nice place. And all of these people were really nice. And of course, it went on so much, you begin to think, well, if they're so nice, you don't have to say it so often, because I see that they're nice. So it went on like that. Fortunately for me, I had an excellent relationship with my children, and never had any trouble. So they actually knew that if I was complaining so badly, that there must be something. I think that's what helped me.
I'm not really the practitioner as much as Audrey, but I would say that you've got to wait until they see sense. And Audrey's book, which you've got copies of, really sets out why you must keep in contact. You must not panic. You must not go away. You've got to be constantly there waiting for them to need you, but they will in the end. And not all, but some will. And if the families stay available don't have a complete break with them. There is some chance. But as Audrey says, brainwashing is very, very powerful. It's as powerful that you can get people, in extreme situations to become suicide. Or now we're beginning to see all around the world people becoming suicide bombers because they've been brainwashed into doing that. I mean, that cannot happen to a person in the normal course of things. It can only happen if there's a real, very clever, very practiced technique used to turn them into somebody else. And when you hear about these cases in Britain, you often hear the parents on friends saying, well, he or she must have been brainwashed. But the frustration for us is that the British government, advised by actually people of your rivals at LSE, have for years really outlawed the term brainwashing and pretended it doesn't exist. It clearly exists. But how could anyone become an extreme cultist unless they've been interfered with mentally? Which is why you need a legal definition for it, which we don't have.
The British government, you see, has got Eileen Barker to defend whatever's happening on the cult scene, and she has told them that there is no such thing as brainwashing. It doesn't exist, she said. And she said that very recently. It doesn't exist. So please don't worry about it. It's just a whole heap of, over-anxious parents and all of this rubbish.